you looking for a heartfelt handmade card to bless your mom this Mother's Day? Well, you need to look no further than this beginner-friendly yet stunning card. I'm going to show you how to create simple florals and add loose leaves to create this beautiful pattern. Then we'll personalize it with your own handwriting. Finally, we'll assemble it with layers of cardstock to create this sophisticated look that your mom is sure to love. Welcome back to Sunlit Brushstrokes. I'm Jessica and I'm super excited to be doing this card together with you today. Handmade cards have always been a big part of family celebrations ever since the time I was a little girl. My mom encouraged me from the time I could draw to make cards for birthdays, for Christmases, and eventually I've developed a style that I'm excited to be able to share with you today. I'm super excited to do this one with you because it's so easy and yet it looks so stunning when it's done. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first of all, let's talk about our paper size. Now, when you buy a normal size sheet of cardstock, it's going to be 8.5 by 11. So typically I cut those in half and I end up with a 1/4 fold card. So it's going to be this size, which is 4.25 this way by 5.5 this way, if you want to have a card that opens vertically. What I like to do with my cards is layer them with other colors of cardstock and then finally the painting. So I will cut a piece of cardstock that's a color that I want for, that will complement my painting. So this may not be the one, but I will cut it the same size as what the card front would be. So this actual piece is only 4.25 by 5.5, whereas of course this is folded over. So once it's folded, it's 4.25 by 5.5. Then for my piece of watercolor paper, I will cut it either an eighth of an inch smaller on all sides or 1/4 of an inch. So here's an example of one that's an eighth of an inch smaller on all sides. So the total is, this way is 4 inches by 5.25. But if you want a little bit more border around it, like say maybe a 1/4 of an inch, this one's got a 1/4 of an inch on all sides. This one is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. So you can go ahead and cut the size you want or tear it. I really like this kind of deckled edge, and so I regularly tear my watercolor paper. This is Arches hot press, but you could use Arches hot press or cold press. But this one here, these pieces are hot press. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of color mixing first. You can follow along with the color mixing I'm doing today, or go ahead and pick the colors that appeal to you, or I should say maybe your mom. You know which colors she likes best, so go ahead and do what works for you in terms of color mixing. So I'm going to go ahead and make a kind of a muted pink. So I'm actually using this mixture that I had from before, which was kind of an orangey color where we had mixed the transparent yellow medium with some quinacridone rose. Well, I'm just going to add more quinacridone rose to it. And then I'll add a tiny little bit of phthalo blue, or I could even just grab this purple here, whichever one. Basically, I'm just trying to dull it down and get kind of a rosy pink that's dull or muted. Again, you could use the purple or the blue to start dulling this color down, and then I'll see if I like my color choices here. I actually don't mind that color. That's kind of pretty. Let's see what it looks like when it's watered down. I think that's actually a pretty color, so I think I might just go with that. However, like I said, go with the color that you think your mom is gonna love the most. Then we need to make a green, and we want a green that's gonna go nicely with this, or we can even have a couple greens if we want. So let's mix our greens. I have greens from a project that I just finished, and so I'm going to just add water to them and see if I have enough of these colors. This one was made by mixing yellow with phthalo blue, obviously, and then a very, very, very small amount of quinacridone rose just to dull it down. But I'm going to see, I might want to, you can see it almost needs to dissolve for a minute because I see little chunks in here. But I'm just going to test this and just see what color. That is really pretty. It's very vibrant. I was kind of, in my mind, that's actually very pretty together. In my mind, I was picturing something that maybe would be a little bit more muted. But that is really quite pretty. I wonder if I'll just mute it a teeny weeny little bit. Let's just take the smallest amount of quinacridone rose and dull it down. Okay, I'm gonna make another green here, and then I'll decide if I'm working and I'm like, I really wish I had gone with a duller color. I can always dull it down Just gonna grab some of this green here. This is not gonna be enough, so I'll just go grab some yellow and some more blue and then more quinacridone rose and get a color after. So got it lighter now, so let's grab a bit of this blue. Tiny bit of rose. More rose. I mean, this is a pretty color if you like that color. I was, again, anticipating something more dull. Yeah, I don't think I want that. I'll probably end up adding more yellow to this as well. Picking up more rose. I think I'm more after that, but definitely go with, again, the green that you think your mom will love. So to get started, I'm going to practice, as usual, on a small scrap of paper. Now this time I am using Arches. This is Arches Hot Press because I want to get the same experience as what I'm going to have when I'm using the paper for my card. There is a time and a place, though, to practice on cheaper paper. And if you want to do your painting on cheaper paper, this would be one you could get away with it because we're just using really loose, simple techniques. So I'm going to grab my number 8, but I might end up using the number 6 brush at times too to get these little leaves on here. So let's go ahead and start. So what you need to do is kind of approach it almost, this is about pressure. You're going to start with light pressure, increase your pressure, and lighten off your pressure. So I'm going to come, and the other thing also pay attention to is your brush. If your brush does not have a sharp point or can't come to a sharp point when you encourage it to do so, kind of rub it against the palette so that, you know, one side might be flat, but the other side will have a nice sharp point. It might be that your brush is too dull and you won't be able to achieve a nice sharp point on your leaf. If you're able to do that with your brush, and then the leaves aren't getting a sharp point, then it's just a matter of like how much pressure you're applying and where you're holding the brush. I'm going to try holding a little further back and see if that helps with control. So you're going to come up to the paper, light pressure, heavier pressure, light pressure. And then I'm going to do 2 strokes per leaf, and I'm going to try and leave a little bit of light in the center of each one so that I've got a little bit of a highlight, if you will, that looks a little more natural. So I'm going to come and do it again. Light pressure, heavier pressure, light. Whoops, that was kind of goofy, but that's okay. Sometimes you can get some neat shapes when that happens. Try not to overwork your leaves. Just let them be what they come out as. If you need to tweak the tip of the leaf a little bit, do that. But doing these loose leaf techniques is really where you want to make sure that you just let it be, because when you're too persnickety, that's where things can start to look overworked in a quick hurry. So I attach those 2. So you can even make some little groupings, because that's what we're going to end up doing on our card. Light pressure, heavy pressure, and light. And again, this can take practice. Don't worry if it doesn't turn out exactly the way you want each time. Once you get your page full of these, you're not going to notice if there's the odd one that's a little bit different shape. And it's actually kind of nice to have some odd shapes as well. Let's go through a few of these darker green leaves in as well. That's kind of see, there you go. Not the same as the others. Might even leave it with that kind of interesting end on it. I kind of like that. Now these are getting a bit big, so maybe I should be using my number 6 brush for this, because I'm liking those shapes better, but they're just getting bigger. So let's see when I use the number 6. And once you feel comfortable with that, then we're going to go ahead and do some practice. You can use the back of your scrap of paper if you dry that off, or you could just grab yourself another piece of paper and we'll practice a few roses. This one is a slightly larger piece of paper, so I may not fill it up as full, but I'm going to come in and do a few of these. So what I'm going to start with is kind of making some little C shapes to kind of curl around each other to form the center of the rose. And then I'm almost doing the same thing as what I did before, where I'm varying my pressure. So I'm coming in with the light pressure, heavier, and then light again as I kind of do those curves. So I'm going to do that, and I've added some water to my brush so that I can kind of get lighter as I come around the outside edges. And then I'm going to come in, well, this is still wet, and dip into my pink again and drop it more in the center so that I get a darker center than what I've already got. And again, I'm trying to kind of keep a little bit of those little C shapes as I do this. And I'm using the tip of my brush to try and move those around. Just a smidgen. Let's try another one. Some C shapes, kind of curling around each other. Oh, and I am using the number 6 still because I want to keep these really tiny and cute. So I'm using my number 6, and then again, more water. And I'm just going to use the water to kind of get things flowing around the outside. Oh, probably obviously had a little bit of green on my brush still, but that's fine, that's pretty. Okay, that's enough for that. Then come back in to my darker pink and drop this in here. Once you feel comfortable with your rose practice, we will move on to our painting. So with the roses still fresh in our mind, let's do those first. And we're going to do them kind of scattered around throughout this. So if you would like to give yourself a little pencil dot to make sure you kind of evenly disperse these in a way that you like, you could do that. You could just grab a pencil and just gently maybe do a dot just randomly over your page. I think I might erase these so they're not quite as bold. You can even put some kind of closer together if you want, because that would actually make some cute, little pairs. So I'm going to do something like that. And then I'm just going to use a kneadable eraser and just kind of softly lighten those, because I don't want like dots in the middle of here, but that's just giving me some guidelines. I could have pushed a little lighter with the pencil, but get those out of the way. And let's go ahead and do that same thing. So we're going to start with those little C shapes, wrapping them around the center. And like I say, as I come outwards, I'm putting more pressure. As I kind of, okay, I start light pressure, heavier pressure, light pressure. So let's do that again. You can kind of see it better there. So light, heavy, light. And I also want to make those more watery. So let's make a watery one here, and maybe I'll turn some of these into some slightly waterier shapes. Is waterier a word? I don't know. And then I'll drop some darker again in the center and just move that around. I'm not quite happy with the outside of this one. I feel like it's a little bit too dark. I'm just going to lift a little bit. You got to be careful when you start messing around too much with these loose flowers. The other thing I should mention, I meant to mention this, is move your paper around a little bit so that not all of the roses end up kind of going in the same direction. You want them to kind of have that scattered look. More water. I'm happier this time. I waited too long to add water on the last one. And, well, better add some darkness to the middle of this. You could even add a bit of this as it's a bit drier, but I'm liking this. And there's the beauty of this like loose kind of watercolor painting is that you never know exactly what you're going to get. It always is a surprise every time because the paint does its own thing. I'm definitely noticing the filler in this. I'm not too worried. This particular project is one where it is a little bit of a lighter toned project, and I'm not doing many layers, so this is a good time to use Van Gogh if you are trying to use it up. But otherwise, yes, if you're using M. Graham, you're totally good. Or any other artist grade paint for that matter. Okay, move on. It's very easy to want to overwork these little ones. Just do this. Okay, some water. Ooh, I'm not liking what I'm messing this one up like, but that's okay. I'm just going to call that good and just drop in a little bit of the dark, and then I'll leave it alone. I can always come back in and do a little bit of tweaking after it's dry, but if I try and tweak too much while it's wet, I'll probably be sorry. So anyways, I got to move my paper a different direction because I'm getting those a little bit too the same. Oh yeah, I noticed I was going to add a little one there. Should I do? Let's wait since it's already kind of dry. I could do it, but I think I'm just gonna wait. Ooh, I'm kind of losing my center there, but it's still there. Okay, this is where I do want to put one little one beside this one. So let's see if we can fit it in. Get some water going. Okay, leave that alone, other than maybe putting a tiny bit of dark in the center of it. And this is where when you start running off the page, just pretend you're not running off the page. You might want something under your painting so you're not painting your table like I'm starting to do. But you want to kind of have that look like these just kind of carry on, flow through. I suppose that if you really wanted to, you could do this on a slightly larger piece of watercolor paper and then trim it down. I don't do that just because I always want these deckled edges and I tend to paint on them after they've been torn. But really, you could tear the whole thing out after. There's no reason you couldn't. It's just my habit is always starting with the size I want, but okay, I've kind of lost things there, but you know what? That's okay. I'm just going to let that be. Like I said, I can always add detail at the end if I decide I need it. If something's kind of like this one where everything's looking flat and it's still quite wet, you could come in and just drop a little bit of color in there. But this one, I'm not doing that because it is like a puddle. It's so wet. So I should say when it's damp, it's kind of one of those things you kind of get a feel for how wet something is when you look at it. It's like, okay, it's still shiny over here. So I know that this will move around just the right amount. This is more than shiny. This is a puddle, and that's why I'm not dropping any more right now. Whereas this one, for instance, it's not even shiny anymore. So I know that if I just drop, it's not going to move. Okay, this one is pretty wet, but I think where the paint is located, I could drop a tiny bit in there and it will be okay. I'm working quite a lot with the tip of my brush, and then yes, when I come to do these strokes, I put more pressure. So this is definitely a pressure thing. So if you just need to practice your pressure, go ahead, do that. You can experiment with how you're holding your brush. Try holding it, you can try working more overhead like this. You can try holding your brush further back, see if it helps. I find holding it back does help me to get that lighter pressure. It sounds completely weird, but it can help when you're struggling with just being too heavy-handed. So I see a couple other spots that I have dots, and I think it would be good to, okay, right here and here, maybe add something there because it looks like it's kind of almost going to have a gap. So let's make this one really coming off the edge of the page. Maybe make it smaller because getting almost full enough, and we want room for our leaves. Drop a little bit of that in the middle. And do one over here. It's kind of almost too wet to get a lot more dark in there. I almost feel like maybe it needs a little something right here. I don't know. There we go. All right, it is time to add our leaves, and I'm going to actually start some of my leaves where I can see wet still on my painting, because I actually want things to bleed around a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead, take my light green, and do this. And in a few spots, I'm actually going to touch. As you can see, I just did there, and I ended up with, ooh, a couple places it's bleeding, but I actually don't mind that. I want a little bit of that happening. So I'm going to try and look around my painting first and see where I can see that so that I add it in. Then I'll come to the dry spots. Let me move my palette. Let me zoom in here. Okay, hopefully you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. Where else is there any wet? Up here, I think. That's kind of weird. Oh well. It can be what it will be. I didn't even touch into there. Let's try this again. I see another wet one up here. I'm just going to turn my paper again. I don't mind turning my paper on this project because I feel like there isn't really a top and a bottom. So I don't feel like I'm making you guys feel like you're upside down. Hopefully you don't feel like you're upside down. Just went and touched that rose a little bit so that the green paint would bleed into it, which is what I wanted. And then I will go around and, like I say, probably anywhere else it's not going to bleed, even if I make it touch, but that's okay. I just wanted it in a few spots. So I'm just gonna go around and finish adding some more leaves in this color, and then I'll grab my dark and add a few dark leaves. There's a nice area that it was still wet, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to create a stem on it. You can always add a few stems in a few places. I think that looks pretty too. So. You can almost connect it, almost like a vine. Okay, I really don't like this leaf here. I think I'm going to try and fix it. Better. Not perfect, better. And again, if you don't like the first time you do this, it doesn't turn out the way that you want it to, that's okay. This is a loose technique. It's okay to have some leaves that are a little bit odd shaped. It's also one of those things that takes practice. And thankfully, because this is such a simple, easy project, you know, you could easily try again if you want to. We never talked about practicing little curlies, but I kind of like that look. I think I'm going to throw a few of those in here. Again, whoops, that one kind of went and touched. If you want some practice doing this on a piece of paper before you touch your watercolor painting, I would recommend you do that. I'm using the very tip of the brush to do it, And it does take some practice just using the tip of the brush to get that effect. I'm going to add curlies in a few other places. I don't want to overdo it, but I do want them to look like, you know, it's intentional, not just, oh, we've got one and that's it. Because they're quite dark, I'm just gonna make my brush thirsty and come in and soak some of it up because I was very dark when I did that, which is fine. I just think, you know what, I think they look prettier when they're light. Again, it's all about brush control, pressure. I find those fine lines, you really need to just use very soft pressure as you come in. Just looking to see. I think I might go ahead and throw a few dark leaves in. This is looking really springy and I kind of like that. I don't know. I don't know that I want to add too many of the dark leaves, but I'll do a few. I might even, when I add them in, I'm thinking, actually, let me grab this and turn my palette. I'm going to add some of these dark ones, and I think I'm going to make them super small because I don't want them to overpower. I kind of like this light green, so I might just add a few smaller green leaves. These are actually not as dark as I thought they might turn out anyways, this paint. Ooh, I guess it depends how heavy you go. I don't quite like what I did there. I tried to make one of those little curly things, and I think it looks a little bit weird, but oh well. It's there now. The thing is once everything's blended in, you don't notice the things you don't like as much. The other thing is you can always, we're going to cover this with a little message, and so sometimes you can make that decision if you have one area of your painting that didn't work and you're able to cover it with your message or whatever. That works really well too. Again, I just keep turning this so that I can get a position that works well for my brush, as well as I want to have that look of just things being very random. And if I do it all right side up, they're going to look like they're all right side up. And I want this to look more like a scattered pattern. Just coming in with little C shape and little, I don't know if you want to say like little Y shape, little curls. I feel like it just needs a little something, and a leaf is too big. And so by doing this little kind of like curly thing, it's not like a full-blown curl like that one, but just almost like I say, just a little C. It adds just enough of something to fill in those little gaps. So I'm just filling in the gaps with those little shapes. And if I can fit a leaf, I will fit a leaf or part of a leaf. And by part of a leaf, I mean if it's cut off the edge of the page like that, I might be able to throw a leaf that's, you know, cut off. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. But if you find that some of your flowers ended up a little bit lighter in the center than you'd like them to be, you can just come back in with your dark red again. And mine's dried out a bit here, but kind of repeat the steps. Just do those little spirals or C shapes in the center, and then just use water and kind of just blend it out. Let's turn the page and see if we need to do one right here. Again, they're beautiful even if they're not, you know, as dark in the center on all of them, but if you find some of them really are lacking life, you could definitely do this. I have a number of small pieces of watercolor paper. This one is an Arches hot press, just a small strip, but I've also got small pieces of cheaper watercolor paper. And what I'm going to do is start to just pencil in some of my messages and decide what I might want to put on the front of the card. I don't know if this is a good habit or not. It's just tends to be the way that I work. By having multiple options, I just feel more freedom to experiment and figure out what works, what doesn't. Gives me a little bit of leeway. If I slop up, I can just do another one. And that's one thing I really like about doing my lettering on a separate piece of paper, is that I don't chance ruining all of the work I've just done in watercolor. I have freedom to just pick whichever one of these I end up liking the most and using it on my final piece. Now that I have all of these penciled in, I can choose which medium I want to go ahead and use to finish it in. Sometimes I'll use gel pen, sometimes I'll go ahead and use paint. A lot of times I'll actually use a felt tipped pen. So all those options work well. Here I'm using a black gel pen. Here I'm using a Crayola Super Tips pen. Although I wouldn't recommend using watercolor paper regularly for doing brush lettering or even any lettering, just because it has a more porous nature. I do want to be able to use the watercolor paper in this particular situation because the paper tone matches, of course, the paper of the watercolor painting that we did. And so I'm going to use a felt pen on here. It's not my normal method, but it is working okay. It's not perfect, but I do think this is a pretty color for writing a Mother's Day message. I'm going to try using another Crayola Super Tips pen. This is a well-loved Mother's Day Bible verse from Proverbs 31. Here I'm using a Crayola Super Tips pen, and I'm doing some brush lettering. I decided to try some of these that were more simple, where I just had the word mom or mama. I decided to try those with watercolor paint and just follow the same concepts that I showed in my faux calligraphy lesson, where my downstrokes are thicker, my upstrokes are thinner, and just do a little bit of brush lettering and see if I like that effect as well. Sometimes I'm throwing a little bit of green in here for variety. I wouldn't consider myself a pro at brush lettering, but if this is something that you guys are interested in learning more about, I can teach some really beginner concepts. Just let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more brush lettering in the future. This one, I'm just going to do pink. And I'll see what I think, whether I like these enough that I want to put them on my card or if I'm going to stick with the Happy Mother's Day. But once all the ink or paint is dry in your little messages or your words, you can go ahead and grab an eraser and just get rid of any of your pencil lines. Now, when it comes to assembling a card, I typically will try and just find cardstock that match my painting rather than paint to match the cardstock. I have a variety of cardstock I've collected over the years, or even just like scrapbook paper. Some of this is just paper. Usually you can find them in like sets with multiple colors, or sometimes you can find them open stock for a really good price. That's what happened to me when I first got into doing cards using these kinds of cardstock. Thankfully, they were on sale at Michael's at that point for a really good deal, and so I stocked up at that point. But I usually buy them in like the 12 by 12 large sheets. Sometimes I'll get them in pads, and I typically look for something that's just plain solid, or maybe like a linen, a little bit of a linen texture like this one. This one came in a whole set with other of the same linen kind of textured cardstock, which was a really good deal when I got that. I don't mind a little bit of texture as well. That's okay. I'm just going to show you these two. They have, if you can kind of see that when I bend it to the light, there's actually some roses in there. And I don't mind that because it's pretty neutral and toned down. One thing I would try and avoid is anything like patterned like this, because that will typically clash with any artwork. You can use them for something else, but I just don't think they work well with your own paintings. I do like something like these, have some little flecks in them, and they were actually in a package. I think these were a clearance at Valentine's Day. You can see the back of them are rather dramatic, cutesy kind of paper, but this side was perfect for using for like a backdrop for something like this. So keep your eye open for that. Look at cardstock that's got maybe two-sided or that's on clearance after an occasion. You might find one side of the paper is really nice for using to combine with your artwork. Another print that tends to work really well, I found a pad of cardstock that was like the whole pad was different colors of like watercolor wash backgrounds, and these particular colors don't work with this so much, but these I find I use all the time. So if you find something that's just either solid or something that's just got, like I say, a watercolor look, works really nicely alongside your watercolor paintings, or even something with a bit of a shimmer. I really like these ones as well, and I use those quite a bit. And again, I buy them all as usually the 12 by 12 cardstock packs or individual like open stock at Michael's. We don't have nearly as many options for craft supplies in Canada though. So Michael's is pretty much my go-to place for scrapbooking supplies, but use whatever you have in your local area. So when I get home, I will take my 12 by 12 sheets of cardstock, or like I say, scrapbook paper, and I'll cut them down into the size that I need for cards. So again, this would be like 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And so I'll do that. And then usually because it's a 12 by 12, there's going to be extra. Again, I'll keep those pieces as well. They can sometimes be skinnier than that, but I keep them because I work with those for putting as backdrops just behind, say, the lettering. So I'm going to show you how I assemble this. But like I say, I like to have a variety kind of available. Again, pick them in colors that you think you'll probably use a lot. Like if you don't work with a lot of oranges, don't bother buying the oranges. Or if you don't work with a lot of pinks, well then don't buy pink. I happen to use a lot of pink and purple, so I have a lot of pink and purple cardstock. So for today, I'm kind of inclined to go with this one. It's kind of got like a textured look, like the printed pattern on it is textured. It doesn't actually have like, you can't actually feel texture, but it's got a beautiful, just slightly textured background to put behind here. And so I'm going to be putting that as my backdrop to this painting. And then I'm going to, you can decide. Sometimes I will pick a color that kind of coordinates, but it's also a bit of contrast to the paper I've already chosen. Or sometimes I might even just pick another piece of the same paper. So to keep it easy today, I'm going to use, this is a smaller piece that matches the one on the back. I'm going to use this to match today, but like I say, you could just as easily pick a green, and the green and pink go beautifully together, but let's get these out of the way and I'll show you how I'm going to assemble my card. Because this is already cut to size, I don't need to do anything with it, so I'll set it aside along with this. Now the other thing I need to decide on is which of these little embellishments I'm going to use. I kind of like the Bible verse myself, but you could just as easily put a Happy Mother's Day or Mom, whichever of them you want to go with. So you're going to take your little embellishment, if you want to call it that, or your words. The other thing you could do is if you have a stamp that's got something on it, like it's a little harder to come by a Happy Mother's Day stamp, say, but Happy Birthday, or thank you, or Merry Christmas, of course, when it's Christmas time. Any of those stamps work really well to just, go ahead, take your stamp, put it onto a piece of cardstock that is pretty neutral, that will match probably most cards you work on. Go ahead, stamp it on there, cut it out, and that's probably the fastest way to do this. I used to do that quite a lot, but I have gotten into using a little bit more of my own lettering, so that's what I'm doing today. Now what I want is something that's going to be about 1/8 of an inch larger on all sides than this piece here. So I'm going to go ahead and measure things out, draw some pencil lines, and then I'm going to cut it out. And then I'll be assembling it by laying this on here and then this onto here. I'm going to go ahead and put this one down first. And another thing to pay attention to is if you did have, say, a flower that you don't like as much, that's a great place to put your message on top of, cover it up. But anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and put the tape on the back. Now this is a two-sided craft tape. I like to put one piece in each corner, as well as, like I say, I'll definitely want one top and bottom here, especially because of the way my paper is bent. And you know what? I have an extra one. I'm going to just throw it in the middle. And then I'm just going to go ahead and remove the back of this. This is always a little bit of fun to try and grab the back of your tape. All right, then just go ahead and lay it out on your piece of cardstock. Try and center it. I usually just try and eyeball what is centered here. Whoops. I try and kind of loosely layer it till I know that I'm actually where I want to be. I feel like I'm slightly crooked. Let's see. That's not bad. Okay. It's starting to kind of pull that up, but I'm not too concerned. I think when I get it, all the layers put together, it should be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with this piece. I'm going to adhere the verse, or in your case, if you want to use a word, or the Happy Mother's Day embellishment, I'm just going to adhere it to the piece of cardstock. So same thing. Again, I'm trying to lift all these little pieces off. Once you've done that, you can, again, try and center it on your piece of cardstock. I'm not a mathematician or a perfectionist, so I just do my best. All right, now, typically, you can just like grab your same tape it down like this. I like using something with a little bit of thickness to add, like to just raise this up off the page a little bit. So you can buy these dots that are like adhesive, two-sided adhesive. I got these years ago at Michael's. And then I think this tape came from the dollar store, if I remember right. But it's, again, most craft stores will have a foam tape that you can use, or even the dollar store. Check both places. You might save money if you go to the dollar store. I kind of really like these dots, so I'm just going to use them. And the stingy side to me always cuts them in half. Don't have to do that, but if you haven't figured it out yet, there's a stingy streak to me, so just about anything that I can stretch, I stretch. I know, crazy. And then I just take off one sticky side off of each. Oh, here, I'll move this out of your way so you can tell what I'm doing better. And yes, this was my two-sided paper that was a Valentine's Day clearance paper, but it works because I do like the other side. So I'll take those off. Actually, sometimes I will put one in the center as well, just so that it keeps it from caving in. So let's just go ahead and do that. Again, cut it in half. If you're stingy, if you're not stingy, don't cut it in half. Okay. So I've got one on each corner and a couple in the center. Then I'll turn it around and try and center this again. And last thing of all, I repeat the whole process on the back. There's my special paper again, by putting maybe one piece on each corner of, this is just the regular two-sided tape again. I don't use the thick one, I just use the regular one. And I will put one on each corner. And again, if you want to put, especially because this paper is curling a bit because of our painting, you could definitely put, like, say, a piece here, and a piece here. I'll go ahead and do that quick. Now, before I actually take all the backing off this tape, I'll typically write in my card first so that I know I've got everything the way I want it, because even when I write in a card, sometimes I slop. And so it doesn't feel so bad if all you do is slop on this section of the card. You can just go rewrite it. And once I'm happy with how I've written the card and done my lettering and everything like that, then at the very end, I will tape this on. So that's a little tip. That way you can save yourself a little bit of the pressure of perfectionism to get things just perfect the first time. I hope that this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it will enhance your mom's special day as you honor her for the blessing she's been in your life, and that it has inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.